them on their own terms. Now, when it comes to language, Afroasiatic is one of the phylum languages that Joseph Greenberg described in his writing in the early 60s, something he worked on a long time. And Ancient Egyptian belongs to Afroasiatic along with 5 or 6 other branches. The debate about whether Afroasiatic arose in Asia or in Africa is almost laughable in the sense that using linguistic criteria of historical linguists, its origin, not only by evidence, but also by actual opinion of most of the linguists, is that it arose in Africa. Why? Because the greatest diversity in family is to be found in Africa. There's only one outlier, and that's Semitic. And Semitic is a very derived member of Afroasiatic. If Semitic were like Omotic, which is found in Ethiopia, and either a distant cousin or a member exhibiting very archaic features, then one could buy reasonably that Afroasiatic arose in the Near East. But otherwise it won't work. So the principles of greatest diversity in Africa, the reconstructions back in Afroasiatic show that it was spoken, that its ancestral mother was spoken by hunters and gatherers, not by Neolithic people. So as you recalled earlier, I pointed out that for those who say that Afroasiatic was introduced into Africa by farmers, the dates won't work, and the reconstructions in the linguistic family will not work. When you reconstruct by using Babylonian, Akkadian, etc., reconstruct agricultural terms back into Proto-Semitic, you wind up with all of the items. And we know, based on archaeology, that they were farming there some 2,000 years before Egypt, and that they were speaking Semitic languages. When you reconstruct terms for agriculture or terms for plants and animals, etc., back in the Afroasiatic, what you find is that they are hunters and gatherers. You cannot reconstruct back into the mother language, the ancestral Afroasiatic terms for farming. Now, the procedure for doing this would take a long time to discuss, and I am not a historical linguist, but I consume historical linguistics and talk to them all the time. You do have some holdouts, and you do have some people who want to still insist on this. I personally believe that's for ideological reasons. Now, the writing in Egypt is Gamal Mukhtar, who was in the Supreme Antiquity Service of Egypt, pointed out that the flora and fauna in Egyptian writing are all essentially local, Nilotic plants and animals, that is to say they're African. More importantly, the terms for kingship, the terms for the crops, even the wheat and barley in ancient Egyptian are not loan words. As you all know, when the British Parliament opens up, Norman French is uttered because a part of the English state that modern English society is rooted in some of those things that William Hastings, etc., and the Normans left here. When you look at, and in other situations as well, we can tell the terms have traveled. The terms of kingship, terms for all the major, for all the implements of the offices, don't come from any place else. They are not Semitic loanwords, they're not Sumerian loanwords. Even the names for the crops in Egypt, those imported things, the wheat and the barley, are Egyptian, which suggests some other things which we can talk about later. To me, it suggests that they were familiar with other similar plants and just simply transferred their names. Is that the case? This illustrates at least one theory about the spread of Afroasiatic, that it arose in the Horn. One would be Omotic, family in the Horn. The actual locale, based on least moves, the criteria of least moves, the most parsimonious locale of origin, would be that the family arose in northeastern Africa, either someplace in the Horn, the Sahara, or Egypt itself. Oh, and by the way, reconstruction in Proto-Afroasiatic leaves us with the term for the donkey. And the donkey is an animal that is native to Northeast Africa. There weren't any donkeys in Palestine or in Syria in terms of the ancestral species. This is just some more on historical linguistics. And this is the family tree of Afroasiatic. There are different versions about, different ideas about the internal relationships of this family. And I just wanted to illustrate to you that there's not any absolute agreement. Some have said based on different aspects of language. You know, some people use vocabulary, cognates, others will talk about structure and syntax, etc., phonology. Some people see a close relationship between Chadic and Egyptian, and figure 4.4 here. Other people would say that Berber, Semitic, and Cushitic are close, and that Egyptian Coptic stand off by themselves, as seen in 4.1. Others speak of a Boer-Afrasian group, whereby Berber, Egyptian, and Semitic are closely allied to each other, and they split apart. The fact of the matter is that when you read historical linguistic studies, and you have to read a lot, you can't just read one writer. Militarev, who works in Israel, who's Russian, still believes that the Afroasiatic arose in the Near East, and he associates it with the Natufian culture. He is a minority in terms of historical linguists. But even he now doesn't say that they were agriculturalists. So once again, we have a split in about a linguistic subject. Now, human biology is very interesting in this regard. We have evidence for individuals in the Nile Valley, people, modern people, going back in terms of hard evidence, 55,000 years since Ram's a child from Upper Egypt. Nasser Kata hominid, we have material from southern Egypt, Wadi Kubaniya. Obviously, there's been a long presence of modern humans in Africa, and the different types of data still point to Africa as being the home of modern humans. We have modern people widespread by 60,000 BP within Africa, material in Algeria, Dar es Sultan too, and other things that appear to be modern human. Obviously down in Ethiopia we have Homo sapiens adultus, which some people say is just before modern humans are modern, and other material as well. When it comes to modern DNA data, it seems that the northeast quadrant of Africa contains a subset of a wider African variation, and that the rest of the world contains a subset of this. Now, I think it's very important that we all gain the apparatus to critique what geneticists turned population historians have become. I can tell you that recently you can find in the genetics literature very interesting claims based on some very old books. For example, a few years ago, an article was written about the Senegambia mitochondrial DNA, in which it was stated that the Fulani, the Fulbe, who are an African people who were found from Senegal to basically Eritrea today, so across the Sahel belt, that they are descendants of the Hyksos. Now, this is from some old books that they got someplace. They clearly didn't read modern linguistics. They clearly didn't talk to modern Africanists. They didn't do it. They got published in the American Journal of Human Genetics. And what happens? You say, well, how did this happen? It happens because the people doing genetics and the editors of those journals are more concerned about the techniques of genetics. And they just assume that the, quote, soft part, they got that right. But they don't give those articles to other people to referee equally as strong, because they don't think that what Africanists have to say is important and what African linguists have to say is important. This is a very harsh judgment on my part. Some of this has changed, but I have the hard evidence that this is true. I have the hard evidence that this is true.